Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I am the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I am so glad that you are with us tonight for this very important community read. It's always a treat when we can have a program. As you know, the Glenbard Parent Series, our mission is to focus on positive youth development. And this topic tonight, this community read, The War for Kindness, Building Empathy in a Fractured World with Dr. Zaki, is just the perfect topic for this year's community read. We have some questions for you, Dr. Zaki, and first up is Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
Ashlyn,
hi, sorry.
Thank you so much for those remarks. My name is Ashlyn Kasgard, and I'm a junior at Glenbard West High School. And my question for you tonight is, you talk about in your book how your parents' divorce kind of took you down this journey to study empathy. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks, Ashlyn, for that great question. I think talk about post-traumatic growth, right? My parents are from very different parts of the world. They're both immigrants. My dad is from Pakistan and my mom is from Peru. And I think they fell in love because they kind of both felt out of place here. But now they've been here, believe it or not, this year marks 50 years since they've been in the US. And so as they grew comfortable in the US, I think they discovered how little they had in common, which as their only kid, I can tell you is like nothing. I mean, they really have nothing in common. And they had a divorce, but it was a really long and really difficult one for all of us. I think they were in a lot of pain, and I was in a lot of pain. And as their only child, I was bouncing back and forth for years between their different houses. But it felt a lot of times like I was bouncing back and forth between different realities. What they cared about was just so different. And when I would try to connect with my dad, I would figure out how to do that. And then I'd try to talk with my mom, and I couldn't use the same strategy at all. It was really difficult. But I think part of me knew that both of them were such great people. They both cared about me so much. And I wanted to be able to connect with both of them. So in order to do so, I think I kind of learned to adjust myself, to realize that I could connect with each one of them, even though the two of them couldn't connect with each other. One of the big realizations for me there was that two people could really fight a lot, could even dislike each other. That didn't mean that one of them was bad. It didn't mean that one of them was wrong. And that in fact, two really good people could come to different views of the world. And I think that's a really valuable lesson for all of us, whether we're children of divorce or not, because there are all sorts of people around our society who disagree with each other and dislike each other. And it's tempting to look for good people and bad people in that equation, to ask who's the villain and who's the hero. But it's not always that simple. Sometimes really good people can dislike each other. Not because one of them is actually bad, but because they have different backgrounds, just like my parents did. So it was a lesson that was hard earned for me, but one that I'm really grateful for.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Zara, you are up next.
Hello, Dr. Zaki. Thank you very much for your lecture. I really appreciate it. It was really great. My name is Zara, and I'm a junior at Glenbard East. And I was wondering, how can I encourage my classmates to become more empathetic?
Yeah, thanks, Zara. That is the question, isn't it? Is sort of what can we do to build more empathic cultures? I guess I would go back to the work that I just told you about with seventh graders, which I think, again, isn't just relevant to middle school. I think it's relevant to almost any culture, which is that when we realize that empathy is popular, that it's a value that we share, we're more likely to sign up for it. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, people don't realize how popular empathy is among the people around them. When I go to schools and even companies, or when I work with other types of organizations, I'll often ask people, how much do you value empathy? And how much do you think the average person in your class or school or company values empathy, or town or whatever? And what you see is that there are two realities. One is what people really feel. And people generally really like empathy. They really want to express it, and they want the people around them to as well. And you can think of that as the true average, what people are telling us about themselves. The other is what they think the average is. So people tend to really value empathy, but then think that the average person in their class or school doesn't value it as much. Do you see how weird that is, right? The real average is what people are telling us about themselves, but then the imaginary average is who people think is around them. And it's really sad, because what it turns out is often going on is that people wish that there was more empathy in their school or class, but they don't want to be the only one. They don't want to go out on a limb. And so one of the most powerful things I think you could do, any one of us could do to encourage empathy in our classmates is, for instance, to ask people anonymously how they feel about empathy, and then to show people what their community really wants. If your community is anything like mine, I think what you would find is that most people, a super majority of people, would say that they really value empathy. And knowing that might give your classmates not peer pressure, but peer permission to express that value, because they know that they're not the only ones.
Thank you. That was a really great explanation, and I wrote some of that down. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Thank you, Zara.
Peer permission, that's perfect. Maria, you are up next.
Hi, Dr. Zaki. My name is Maria. I'm a senior at Glenbard West. I'm also half Pakistani, so I was really glad when I heard you.
Nice.
It was awesome to really hear what you were talking about, because I could tell you genuinely cared about the topic. And I know that you teach a very popular freshman class at Stanford. And I was wondering how the course impacted your students and yourself, and what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Maria. And shout out to Pakistan, which is unfortunately going through a huge natural disaster right now. Yeah, I teach a class called Becoming Kinder. It's a small seminar that I teach for first-year students at Stanford, and it's been just revolutionary for me. For one, I'm so inspired by those students. I think that your generation, Maria, is often treated unfairly by my generation, to be frank. I often get asked when I speak to people about kids these days, about Gen Z or whatever, and aren't these folks too focused on themselves and narcissistic and selfish? And I answer, you clearly don't know enough people from that generation if you think that. Your generation inspires me. You are so globally conscious and so oriented towards what you can do in the world to make it a better place. And interacting closely with students in that seminar continually inspires me. It also motivated me to I guess, take the ideas in my research in my book and try to make them more practical. So every weekend, I send those students in that class off with an assignment, which I call a kindness challenge. The assignment is not to read or write something, it's to do something differently in their own lives. For instance, talking with someone they disagree with in a new way, or trying to be kind to themselves after they fail at something. And then we report back. And it's just been really amazing to see how students respond to this. And then I do the challenges myself, and it's really hard, and we grow together. And it inspired me also to create an online version of those challenges that any of you can look up. They're at warforkindness.com/challenges. These are just everyday exercises that any of us can try. Is easy, right? So I think that that's been one of the most influential things for me about that class, is just trying to create that challenge for myself and for others.
Thanks. I'm definitely going to check those out.
Thank you. Next up is Shannon.
So I am Shannon from Glenbard North. I am a senior. Thank you so much for joining us for this lecture tonight. So I know that you had mentioned this earlier in your presentation, and that how challenges and experiences can shape a person and make them more empathetic. So do you think that there's a direct correlation, and what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, there's a bunch. It's a great question, first of all, Shannon. Thank you so much for asking it. Yeah, I think that we all go through hardships and adversity. Many of us have been through more hardship over the last couple of years than we had been before. And I think that it's very easy to think of that as something that will be with us in a negative way. And it can be, oftentimes people who suffer a lot have a really hard time afterwards because of that suffering. And I do not want to minimize that at all. But as I was talking about, there are also strengths that we develop through hardship. And one of those is the way that we treat other people. So there's a whole scientific literature, a bunch of studies on what's known as altruism born of suffering. So what does that mean? It means that oftentimes when people go through something really difficult, they turn around and are more inspired to help other people, especially other people who have been through something similar. So there's research on people whose towns have been affected by war, or people who suffer serious illnesses or suffer from addiction or a serious mental illness, or people who have been the victims of crimes. In all of these cases, you see that people it's almost like suffering pops up an antenna in our head, an antenna that tunes us in to other people's suffering and makes us want to help those people when they are. You see this a lot. I've been inspired by people who become peer counselors. This is people who suffer in a particular way and then change their whole life to help other people. You see this among veterans, among victims of assault, among all sorts of people. It's just one indicator of many that one of the, and I hesitate to use this term, but really it's appropriate, one of the benefits of hardship. And I know, again, we don't want to experience hardship, but when we do, one of the ways that we grow through it is often by becoming kinder and more connected with other people who are like us.
That's really beautifully put. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jason, you are up next.
Hello, thank you for
Hi.
speaking today. I'm Jason Lowe, and I'm a senior at Glenbard South. And my question is about hardships and how to help people with hardships. And when someone does have a hardship, who you're close with, what is that line of we, as non-professionals, where we can help versus having them seek out professional help? And when does empathy, it can't be just our own empathy, but actual professional help?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And so many of us have friends who are dealing with really significant hardship now. And, the first thing I want to say is it's a hardship to care about somebody who's going through hardship. So it's important when we're connecting with someone who's in great pain to also have compassion for ourselves and understand that that's hard for us too, right? I think that to your question, supporting people who are our friends, our family members who we care about, and having them go seek professional support, it's not an either or. In fact, people who feel like they have a better peer support network are more likely to feel safe going to seek professional help. So I don't think that being there for a friend substitutes for them seeking professional help. It can help them evaluate whether they need it or not. Now, when it comes to how we interact with other people who are suffering, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that you don't necessarily know what that person wants or needs. You might think that they want you to fix their problems when they really don't. And oftentimes we feel too much pressure, and we put too much pressure on ourselves to say the right thing. We think that if someone else around us is suffering, we need to have the answer. And that can prevent us from reaching out to somebody who's struggling because we think, oh man, it's just gonna be awkward. I'm not gonna say anything that will really make a difference for them. They already know everything I'm gonna say. But it turns out that oftentimes we vastly underestimate the power of just being there and not giving people answers, but maybe asking them questions, getting to know their experience. And just through showing that we care, we often make a huge difference for people. In fact, there's a lot of research on this, that we underestimate how helpful we'll be because we think we need to say something, as opposed when really what people often want is just for us to listen. So again, just to sum up, I think it's important to have compassion for ourselves. I think that it's okay if we don't know the answer for somebody who's suffering. I think just being there for them can be helpful. And it's important to know that that doesn't mean that they shouldn't also seek out help from professionals. In fact, we can be their support system that gets them to take that step.
Thank you so much.
We have one more student question, but I want to take this question that's in the Q&A. As a starting point, if a group wanted to learn about their individual empathy levels, for self-knowledge and to help understand each other better and use that information to help the group pull together, how would they go about that? Would that be the 30 question instrument you mentioned? And is that available? Is there something else?
Yeah, so there are two very famous empathy tests. The one that I talked about is known as the Interpersonal Reactivity Index, or IRI. There's not a user-friendly version of it online, but my lab is creating one right now, so stay tuned. We hope to have it in the next couple of weeks. And Gilda, you can feel free to reach out to me, and if I have it by then, I can send it along. The other is what's known as the Reading the Mind in the Eyes task. And that there's a version of that was posted by the New York Times. So if you look up Reading the Mind in the Eyes, New York Times, you'll find a public version of that empathy test. But I should warn you that I personally don't find it to be as useful as the IRI. So there's one that's available and less useful, and there's one that's more useful, but not yet available. But I'll hope to make that available soon.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Juliana, you are up next.
Hi, I'm Juliana and I'm from Glenbard East. I'm a senior this year and I really want to thank you for this because I'm actually doing a research project for my sociology class about social media and teenagers. So this is really interesting for me. So many teachers are struggling, teenagers. So many teenagers are struggling online with image and confidence. If we all become more empathetic, it would be a great place to start. What suggestions do you have to build empathy and to support each other online, since all teenagers seem to be struggling now?
It's such an important question. So first, Juliana, thank you for asking it. I do have to ask, is that a record collection behind you?
Kind of. It's sort of, yes.
Okay. I'm astonished that you even know that you have records. I mean, like that's even before my time, but no, I love it. So yeah, you ask one of the biggest questions that people in my world are asking right now. I think that social media platforms are, I was talking about this earlier, right? They're not really built in a way that is that conducive to empathy. They sort of are built to keep us online through whatever grabs our attention, which is often anger or fear or self-image. And it's hard to break that because, right, again, we'd have to reshape the entire platforms. That said, though, we can also think about how we engage individually with social media. It turns out that it's easy to denigrate social media and say it's all bad, it takes away all our empathy no matter what. Research, as you know, maybe from your project for your sociology class, it points to a more complex picture. Sometimes online activity can take away our empathy, but it can also build it. And it turns out that the ways that people interact online that are more positive for empathy tend to be when people are interacting one-on-one. So sort of not just posting or I suppose lurking, as people would call it, or doom scrolling, but rather actually interacting with people, whether it's, Snapchat streaks or, direct messages or what have you. And then the other way is when things are synchronous, when people are actually interacting in real time. I think social media platforms are often not used in that way, but when we can use them instead to sort of directly connect with people, especially people we care about, that can be useful. The last thing I'll say is that oftentimes we use social media not to present what we're really going through, but to kind of advertise a persona that we have. And that's normal. It's totally normal. I do it too. But oftentimes when, I've talked with people who use social media in this way, when we're willing to express vulnerability, when we're willing to pull back the curtain and show people what we're really feeling, the good and the bad, it can open up a deeper conversation and allow other people to do the same.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting and helpful. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And these questions are terrific. I really appreciate you and all the other students asking these wonderful questions.
I know Jessica wants to have some closing comments, but before we get to Jessica, I have a question. What keeps you optimistic?
Oh, that's a great question because I'm now writing a book about hope. So I have a lot to say about that, and I'll try to keep it brief. I feel really sad and scared a lot of the times about the future. But what keeps me optimistic and hopeful is is other people. I think that oftentimes the way that humanity is portrayed in the media, the way that we're encouraged to see each other, is just not accurate, and it's systematically inaccurate. There's a ton of research that shows that people believe that others are much more selfish, much less friendly, much angrier, and even more violent than people really are. The good news is that that most people are probably way better than you think they are. And the bad news is that most people don't know that. So, to me, what keeps me optimistic is that I truly believe that if people could see each other more clearly, that they would realize that we have a lot more in common than we think, and that a lot of our shared values are around community, togetherness, and kindness. So I'm on a mission to help people discover those common values and to see them in each other. I think that to the extent that we can start to maybe turn things around.
Beautiful. Jessica, I turn it to you for closing comments or a question.
Thank you. I just thank you so much, Dr. Zaki. I actually had several questions, but the students did such a good job. I think they hit on pieces of each of those questions. I just want to share, and I know I'm not speaking for everyone, but I generally feel that the words that you're sharing and the idea of really talking about things like kindness and things like empathy and things like that's the pieces that make us strong and bring our communities together, is what our schools are really working on fundamentally forever, but especially post-pandemic, and just that importance of relationships and understanding each other, giving each other grace, and really trying to walk in one another's shoes, or at least just appreciate the shoes that others are walking in and try to have understanding behind them. So I think you just empowered us with quite a few different ideas and ways to look at this and to keep working on it. I can speak for my own school. We just had always these 3 R's in our Raider Pride. And in the last few years, we've added relationships, because, there is so much importance in the fundamental nature of humanity and relationships, and understanding each other is what a community is really about. So your work obviously is a testament to all that, and we can learn a lot from you. So thank you.
Well, it sounds like we're on the same mission. It's been an absolute pleasure joining you all. And yeah, I hope this was useful. And, I'm easy to find. If folks have other questions, please feel free to reach out as well.
We'll see you back when it's time to read about hope, Dr.
Yeah,
Zaki.
absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good, come back next week, Suicide Prevention Month event with Dr. Klopowitz. See you then next Wednesday. Be safe, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye, students.